Once again, welcome to GPS, God's Prophetic Surprises, the program where we take an intergenerational approach to the book of Revelation. I'm Jon Paulien, professor of religion at Loma Linda University, and to my left
is Iris Mamier, also with Loma Linda University, but the School of Nursing.
All right.
And I'm Guilherme Borda. I am a PhD student in New Testament at Andrews University.
And with us from Kansas.
Hey everybody, I'm Nick, and I'm living here in Shawnee, Kansas, and I'm serving the Kansas-Nebraska Conference as the Youth and Young Adult Director.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. And in our last program, we were looking at the sixth plague in Revelation. So if any of you would like to get a Bible or your tablet or phone, however you want to do it, go to Revelation 16. And the sixth plague runs from verses 12 through 16. In our last program, we went through there briefly and noticed that the plague itself is actually verse 12. Verses 13 through 16 are background, things that happened before the plague. And you pick that up when you compare with chapter 17, where there's a parallel series of events. So, we've completed verse 12, we're moving into verse 13 now, but we're actually moving back in time. Verse 12 is the end of the plague. It's the drying up of the Euphrates River. It's the nations of the world changing their minds about Babylon. But leading up to that point, the nations haven't gotten together yet in verses 14, okay? So it goes back in time. And you see dragon, beast, and false prophet trying to gather the nations together. So in Revelation, time is not always linear. And this is one of those places, I think, where that fits. Nick, I'd like you to read verse 13 for us, and we'll get into that first.
Good thing. Here we go. Then I saw three impure spirits that looked like frogs. They came out of the mouth of the dragon, out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet.
All right, we're obviously in some very interesting territory here. And let me start by asking the question, who are these guys? The dragon, the beast, and the false prophet? Who wants to take a shot at that?
Well, the dragon, I think, is clearly Satan. God's adversary, that the one that is slandering God, the old serpent.
Okay, so the dragon represents Satan. I think in chapter 12, verse 9, it even says the dragon, who is also called Satan, the ancient serpent, and a few other things. Yeah, all right. So that's one down. What about the beast and the false prophet?
Yeah, when you go to chapter, when you go back and look through the previous chapters to try to find some evidence or something that could lead you to an answer to this question, you see that in chapter 13 you find an evil trio. Because we have this evil trio in chapter 16 of the dragon, the beast, and the false prophet. And in chapter 13 we also find an evil trio, the dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast. And then in part, when you go to the section on the land beast, he refers also to the beast, referring to the sea beast without qualifying it as the sea beast. So it would seem that here we have the same trio, the dragon, the sea beast, and the land beast, but here referred as the dragon, the beast, the sea beast, and the false prophet. Now, why would the land beast be called false prophet here? That would be, I guess, the next question to consider. I think that part of it is...
Why didn't they just say the land beast, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Or why didn't they call the beast that came out of the earth? Why didn't they call it the false prophet in chapter 13? So that is definitely an issue to address here. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that, it's very interesting to consider the relationship between these two beasts, the sea beast and the land beast, and how the land beast promotes the sea beast. In a way, it speaks for the sea beast to the world. Come, worship the image of the beast. And prophets speak for a deity. They speak on behalf of a deity, and they invite people to follow a deity and to worship a deity. So I think that it fits very well the role that the land beast plays in chapter 13.
Okay. It's a good theory. Anyway, but let me take you somewhere else. There's an interesting verse in chapter 19. And in chapter 19, verse 20, it says, "But the beast was captured," there's the beast again, "and with him the false prophet." Okay, so here you have the false prophet once again. And then it says, "The false prophet who had performed miraculous signs on his behalf. With these signs, he had deluded those who had received the mark of the beast and worshiped the image." All right, so who's that? It's the land beast.
Yes.
In chapter 13, the land beast does deceptive signs in order to deceive the world and get them to take the mark of the beast. So chapter 19:20, I think, clarifies that the false prophet and the land beast are the same character in this book. Now, I thought it might be interesting. Let me just share something here from a little side research. In the book Great Controversy, which many Seventh-day Adventists appreciate a great deal, there's actually an interpretation of this text, this passage. And she says the following. This is page 588. She says, "Satan has long been preparing for his final effort to deceive the world. Little by little, he has prepared the way for his masterpiece of deception in a development of spiritualism. He's not yet reached the full accomplishment of his designs, but it'll be reached in the last remnant of time, says the prophet, except those who are kept by the power of God. Through faith in his word, the whole world will be swept away." So she's quoting, I didn't read it here, but she's quoting Revelation 16, 13, and 14, and saying that the dragon represents spiritualism. Now, Iris, does that sound anything like what you were saying? Dragon and Satan. What does Satan have to do with spiritualism?
Well, spiritualism is when you pray to the wrong God, to the one who puts himself, exalts himself in the place of God, right? Mm-hmm. And it draws the attention away. It's a form of idolatry, if you want. Mm-hmm. It draws the attention away from worshiping Creator God, the only one who deserves to be praised.
It's fascinating. One of my son's online acquaintances basically has everything reversed. Satan is the true God. Christ is a counterfeit. The Bible's trash, and so on. My son comes out of his room really exercised about these things. So the idea is that the spiritualism at the end of time, and then she goes on to say, the Protestants of the United States will be foremost, stretching their hands across the gulf to grasp the hand of spiritualism. They'll reach over the abyss to clasp hands with the Roman power, and under the influence of the threefold union, this country will follow in the steps of Rome in trampling on the rights of conscience. So she's trying to identify this dragon, beast, and false prophet with three entities in her time and place. Spiritualism was very popular in public. Protestantism was dominating the country, but there was a resurgence of Catholicism with a lot of immigration from Ireland and Italy and Spain and so on at that time. So she was putting these three together. How does, what do you think about that, Nick? Is that an interpretation that is going to make sense to the average young person today? I mean, you were just dealing with a young people's camp. When they'd hear a statement like that, what would they say, do you think?
I think they would just simply have a lot of questions that they want to ask. I think it would sound kind of far-fetched at first to them, but I think they'd be willing to listen to an explanation. So I think that's how they would approach it. Like, where did this come from? What are you getting at?
Okay. So that's a good reason for having a program like this where we can ask the questions. We've gone 150 years or so. What do we do with that kind of information? And what would be the equivalent today? I mean, today, like you say, young people probably say, well, what's spiritualism? Who's a Protestant? Who's a Catholic? Whatever. Many of these might not even be strong references for them. What do you think, Guillermo?
Well, I think that for a younger generation, what I would also put is place this side by side with other instances in the book of Revelation where you have this expression, out of the mouth. Mm-hmm. So this out of the mouth or out of the mouths is, if not in every instance, at least in most instances, has in a context of conflict or a weapon or a resource for conflict or confrontation. This fits this narrative of this book as this cosmic conflict between good and evil. There is the ones that are on the side of God, like the two witnesses, what comes out of their mouths in that conflict, and then out of Jesus' mouth, that sword, and then there's this evil side. And I would also point out whether they can perceive that in the world there is conflict that goes beyond what the eye can see. I appreciate what Walsh and Kismet in their books, Colossians Remixed, they say that what every empire wants you to think is that what you see is what you get. But the book of Revelation is partially unveiling reality and saying there's this conflict beneath what you can see. And then, because look at how much we have these struggles in humanity, in human history, wars, economic conflicts, social issues, racial tensions, all kinds of conflicts. Why is that so? Behind that, is there something? What causes these issues? And also considering this issue of deception.
So I hear you saying that perhaps what Ellen White was doing in this book was a local application, but you're seeing something much bigger in the context of Revelation itself.
No, I mean, I think what she is saying is she's identifying these key players in that conflict on that evil side. And the interesting thing is that she's pointing at players that people would not normally associate with the evil side. Mm-hmm. You see, so generally people would associate at least some of those players with the good side. But part of what Revelation does is you have to rethink the world. Actually, the Bible does that often, right? No wonder that it is the revelation of God. We couldn't just get it. Mm-hmm. God has to reveal to us and lead us to rethink things. And often, players in the world, global arena that seem to be the good guys may not be all that good.
And so to you, the startling reference might to see Protestants and Catholics as maybe playing into Satan's hands in here, and that would be the surprise. And I think, Nick, I think one of the things, if I'm thinking correctly, is that many younger people are uncomfortable with something that seemed to be very common in the 19th century, and that was religions kind of calling each other out. How would you approach that with the younger generation?
How would I approach that discomfort that they might feel?
Calling out Protestants and Catholics is in some way on the wrong side.
I think it's interesting. I think in these times there is a discomfort with one person saying their way is better than another, and yet there's a lot of comfort calling people out or even canceling people. And I was thinking about the comment earlier, and I think young people really are interested in the big picture of what's happening and who's causing what, and wanting to kind of get to the bottom of it all and figure out what's really going on. But yeah, there's, in one sense, don't say your way is better, and in the other sense, there's a comfort with pointing out the challenges that someone might have.
Well, Nick, you really caught my attention there, though, because you said young people today are uncomfortable with calling out, and yet they do a lot of it themselves, and sometimes praise people who do. There's a bit of a tension there, and maybe you want to come back on that a little later if you want to unpack that a little bit more. But I was really that really grabbed me. Iris, you were going to say?
Well, I was wondering whether an approach with young people would be to kind of look at the messaging that they are receiving. I mean, if the powers that Ellen White saw in her time are still active today, I think if we look at the life world that young people are surrounded by, they are bombarded with messaging. Look at the movies, look at social media. What are the messages? Some of them very toxic that they are being bombarded with. And, you know, maybe I would almost take an inductive approach with those young people and say, you know, let's look at that. And is that messaging, is that really true? Is that really compatible with what God's word tells you to be true about you? You know? And I think maybe, you know, and very clearly, I think spiritualism is a power that is very present.
There's a lot of darkness in recent movies, in
Yes.
many contexts there. So that part, at least, Protestantism, I think, with the exception of the evangelical right, you know, isn't making as much of an impact. But the evangelical right, I think many young people are uncomfortable with some of the positions that they are taking. So the younger generation might, you know, have some issues with all three of these as well when you think about it.
And just a quick thing too, it's very interesting to focus on this expression of this third player here, the false prophet, because dragon is clearly a negative, you know, entity. A beast, clearly a negative entity in light of what we saw in chapter 13. But then here, a prophet, but it is qualified as a false prophet. But an interesting thing is that a prophet does not present himself or herself as false. They present themselves as legitimate. The falseness is not explicit, or at least it's not disclosed. They don't disclose their falsehood. It is disguised. It is a deception. And so, and I think that we all are familiar these days with things that come out of mouths of people that are prone to speak falsehood. And so, you know, and often people wonder, I don't even know what's the truth, because these people say this, those people say that, I don't know what to make of it, right? And so I think people are familiar with that experience of being confronted with an entity that speaks falsehood. And something comes out of them, we'll come into what comes out of their mouths later, but an entity that is distinctly false, but that doesn't present itself as such, presents itself as a source of truth. Prophets present themselves as a way to connect with something bigger than yourselves, to find meaning, to find purpose. But this is a false one.
And there's two types of falsehood. The one type is where you know it's false, but you're trying to deceive. The other one is where you're self-deceived and you think it's true, even though it's false. And you're absolutely convinced that it's true. So that can go either way. Let me just, to draw this to a close, this little piece, I want to share one more statement from Great Controversy. this is actually from a different place, though, just so people would understand, when you can critique an institution, such as Catholicism or evangelical Christianity, or a political party, you can critique an institution, but it probably one needs to be careful not to make it seem that everybody that's part of that institution buys into it all, or is equally to be seen in a negative sense. And in Evangelism, page 575, here's this interesting statement: we should not go out of our way to make hard thrusts at the Catholics. Among the Catholics, there are many who are most conscientious Christians who walk in all the light that shines in them, and God will work in their behalf. So one thing I've often said, God is at work in every religion, and Satan's at work in every religion. So I think that's a piece we have to keep in mind when we see critiques like this, and attempt to see the good in where other people are, as well as to, if necessary, critique what is not so good. Let's go. I want to show you something else in chapter 16, verse 19, because you have three here: dragon, beast, and false prophet, right? Notice what happens in verse 19. It says, the great city split into three parts, and the cities of the nations collapsed. And God remembered Babylon the Great, gave her the cup filled with the wine of the fury of his wrath. So it says Babylon falls into three parts. What are those three parts? The only conclusion I can come to is dragon, beast, and false prophet, just in the previous verses. So dragon, beast, and false prophet coming together with the kings of the earth develops Babylon. But then in the very next plague, Babylon collapses, and all of its support as well. So Babylon is not just a single entity, it's actually an alliance of religious powers. Whereas it's trying, in verse 14, as we'll see, to develop an alliance of political powers. So you have a world where everything's falling apart. Remember, 7 last plagues: sores, heat, blood, just all kinds of things going wrong. And in that context, people are seeking to unite in the hopes of saving the planet. It's not that unfamiliar to us a bit today, that concept. And so here you see a union coming together of both religious authority and political authority. That's, I think, the dynamic we see in these verses. And as you were saying, I think, Guillermo, earlier, Babylon then is an alliance of religious powers. They're the good guys in most people's minds. But according to Revelation, there'll be a time when Babylon is not on the right side, when religion is on the wrong side. So it's sort of an end-time version of every oppressive power that we've seen through history, particularly religious powers. So, having said that, who are these frogs? All right, in Revelation, you come up with all kinds of stuff you don't always see in everyday life. You got dragons spitting out frogs. So who are these guys? Who are these frogs?
I think that just before actually dissecting the symbol, it's important to remember at the symbolic level, what do they speak to us, right? You remember in Egypt, there was this plague of the frogs, and then the Egyptian magicians like, we can pull that off too. And then they make frogs come up as well. It was a deceptive effort. False. These magicians were performing false miracles. So these frogs are a deceptive effort to undermine God, what God is doing with the plagues, and to kind of try to, hey, we can do it too. To try to validate the credibility of this evil system.
So these frogs are outgrowths of this false religion. So it's a religion that is attempting to deceive. So these frogs fit in with the whole idea of deception. But Nick, would you read verse 14 of chapter 16? Because I think we need to bring that in now.
Okay. They are demonic spirits that perform signs, and they go out to the kings of the whole world to gather them for the battle on the great day of God Almighty.
All right, so these frogs are defined as the spirits of demons, or demonic spirits that go out to the world to deceive. So what are demons? Anyone have a shot at that?
Fallen angels.
Fallen angels? Okay. In the ancient world, among the ancient Greeks, demons were superior to humans, but inferior to the gods. All right, so that kind of fits in the broadest sense. Among the Hebrews in the Old Testament, the angels had the role that demons had in the Greek world. So those two are seen as parallels. In later Judaism, demons are subordinates of Satan. And then the New Testament takes up the Jewish view. So you have the idea of angels, somewhat between human beings and God. And some of them are good and some of them are not. Nick, we got 3 angels here. Why do you think that is?
Well, we got, they're messengers, right?
Uh-huh.
And so there's the messengers of God with the last message, and then there's the messages of Satan through these demons that are calling them to this union to fight back at this climactic battle.
So here in chapter 16, you have a true Trinity in the background, God and Jesus, the Holy Spirit. You have a counterfeit Trinity, dragon, beast, and false prophet. You have messengers of God, 3 angels, Revelation 14. You have messengers of Satan, 3 demons, Revelation 16. So it seems to me that what is happening here is the entire world is being invited to take seriously the issues of God and the issues of truth at the end of time. A true gospel, a false gospel, and the people on earth have to decide. So a final time in Earth's history when everybody has to make a decision. And that might be God's prophetic surprise for this time. We'll see you next time. GPS.